Hi, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. A very good evening to all of you. Welcome back to Point of View, an online conversational series by the Sindhave School of Design in collaboration with ADI, the Association of Designers of India. My name is Aditi Vitasta Dhar, and I'm the moderator for this session of POV. I'm a designer by training from NIT Ahmedabad. Although my career has been largely in fashion, I'm an accessories designer and a fashion entrepreneur. I'm also an educator with NIT, Pearl, IICD, and a member of the ADI Delhi chapter. I would like to also introduce Cinder Bay School of Design, which was established in 2006 in Calicut, Kerala, and has been ably helmed by Professor Basant Nair, the director of CSD. 2021 marks a significant milestone for the school, 15 years of being a well-recognized institution for design education, offering undergraduate and PG courses in interior design, visual communication, fashion. CSD is spread across South India with 14 branches and 13,000 strong alumni. So this is a fantastic achievement, and I would like to congratulate the entire team at Cinder Bay and to many, many more achievements ahead. As part of this milestone, Cinder Bay has organized and curated a point of view, which invites designers, architects, and artists to discuss their journeys and insights with a young audience in the hope of inspiring them as well. A quick hello to the Cinder Bay team behind the scenes making it all happen. And for the audience today, thank you very much for joining us again. And for the students, especially, I think we had a wonderful session with Rahul Kadri, which was moderated by Shrishti Bajaj. And today we have another very special guest, Mariana Cabugueira, who is a senior designer at Zaha Hadid Architects, which of course needs no introduction. She works at the cutting edge of architectural design, innovation and technology, and of course, creativity. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mariana on video. Mariana, if you could just put your video on.
Hi, hello.
Hi, Mariana. Very nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, and we're very excited for your session today. I know a lot of people have logged in and to chat with, to see our chat, to ask their questions. So I'm super excited for everyone in the audience. They're going to get to see something very interesting because we've been having different speakers come up and their different points of view, which is what this series is about. And I think your perspective, your journey and your point of view is going to be incredibly interesting for them to see as well. Let me just start with a brief introduction to you for the audience very quickly. Mariana is an architect and urban designer from Portugal, and she is currently a senior architect at Zaha Hadid Architects based in London. Amongst other roles, she also teaches at the Architectural Association in London and does live workshops and webinars with students from around the world, teaching a software called Maya, and this I think is pretty amazing because this is a very nice part of your professional work as well. And we'll talk a little more, and you have a little more about that later on in the session. She also graduated from the School of Architecture in Lisbon and the Politecnico di Milano, and then moved to London to study further for a postgraduate course at the Design Research Laboratory, or DRL, at the Architectural Association School. And her interests gravitate around parametric design, generative design, and fluid digital design using technologies such as robotic fabrication. Mariana has also joined, had joined Zaha Hadid Architects in 2017, and she is part of the competition cluster responsible for high-end design projects of the office. So that's, and of course, there is a lot of work is extensively online. I would encourage all of you to check out her Instagram page, check out the links that we are going to share, her social media links, some of her talks. What is nice about Mariana is that she's very active with the student community. So she's always happy to discuss architecture, to discuss software. She teaches it. So I think all of you will be, would really like to see what her work has been and what the kind of work that she's doing, the kind of stuff that she's teaching. So all the links will be in the chat box, so please go ahead and check them out. Mariana, without further ado, I want to start off by asking you that I just want to first tell the audience that you're joining us from London. And I wanted to ask you, London's it's a very cosmopolitan international city, and you work with an international team as well. How do you think the city contributes to your work as an architect?
It's funny you asked that. I think it actually contributes quite a lot, quite more than you would expect. Because to be honest, I feel like London is a segregated part from England. I barely see England there. Which also kind of advocates their idea of the Brexit, but you kind of feel London as a different hub, like an fully international hub.
Yeah.
And I also call it the Neverland. People don't really grow up. Everyone is super young, and everyone is very focused on work and socializing with their colleagues as well and friends. So it's very much oriented towards colleagues and work.
Yes.
And it kind of helps on this, even on the workflow, on the workload that you take. I probably work more in London than I work when I go to Portugal, for example, because everyone is working, and that's kind of the kind of life that you do. That you work or you go out and have drinks with your friends.
Yeah.
That's it. So there's no other obligation. So it's a very different city from the whole world, and I think my productivity is quite high in London.
I agree. It's a very cosmopolitan, very dynamic young city because it attracts the best talent from everywhere. For example, you also came to London to further study, further explore, to build your own professional career. And I think for a lot of people, that's a very that's a huge draw to come to London and work with different kinds of people and be a very international city. Great. Okay.
I'm not sure if it attracts the talent people. I think. Sometimes I hear some things about talent, and I think we should mitigate that idea that talent really overpowers your ambition or the amount of work that you put on. So what I feel that London kind of gathers people who are very ambitious.
Ambitious, yeah, and hardworking
super hardworking.
Yeah.
And then the talent comes after.
I agree. I think that's important, especially when you're a young designer starting out. Ambition, work ethic, a strong work ethic, and if you have all that, and a city like London will also sort of put you in that position to do all that. I think it really cultivates it. It's a very strong cultivator of what kind of design you're going to do and the kind of output you're going to have. So I would like to get going with a poll question before we really get into your work. And I would like to ask the audience to chime in and and give us their understanding and their just weigh in. So Swapna, can we have the first poll question, please? And this is kind of connected to everything we're going to talk about. So I'd like the audience to tell us what they think about this idea of fluid architecture. So the question is, what is the key feature of fluid architecture? The first option is digital software and AI, free forms and curves, complex engineering design, and non-classical. If the audience can just weigh in, we will also get an idea and a feel for what they think about this concept. And Mariana, you're going to talk to us a lot more about it. So I don't know if we've already got the answers up, but I think we can go to the poll answer as well. Why not? Because I'd like to ask you and discuss what the audience thinks of the idea of fluid architecture. All right, here it is. The 88% felt it was free forms and curves. Okay, only 6% complex engineering design and 6% digital software and AI. Okay, so everybody, I think the audience, at least today, kind of visualizes it as something that's very freeform and curvilinear. How would you describe fluid architecture?
I think I would most likely tend to say complex engineering design.
Okay.
Because when you look at it, yeah, it is freeform and it is curves, but it's only possible, and it only makes sense because it's being backed up by complex engineering design.
Yeah.
One of the main purposes of creating fluid architecture is not just to exercise free forms, it's actually to push for engineering understanding of geometry.
Yes.
And that's something that we do a lot research on, which is what kind of geometry can engineering be pushed and allowed for. So all the curves and all the freeform has to be a complex geometry that is able to be done by engineers. So I think I like the third one better.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that everything that you see as a structure is a feat of engineering itself, and what architecture does, it allows us now to kind of develop those complex structures, engineering structures, because then can we actually make it a reality, and that's kind of where what you guys do. You do the research, you do the you look at how the software can create such structures, you look at the engineering, and then it comes to fruition for clients.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of what happens, apart from the visual beauty of it and the aesthetic of it, is the back end, which is a lot of science, engineering, research.
Definitely. And it's one of the goals as well.
Yes.
The goal is not just aesthetic. The goal is a lot to do with how can we improve the way we manufacture, and how can we improve the way we know engineering. And that's something that Zaha did quite a lot, right? She knew a lot about. She was a mathematician as well. So it was going pair in pair, right? Freeform and engineering.
Yeah. And I think that's pushing the boundaries is kind of what Zaha Hadid also had as a vision about what engineering and what form could be with technology, with other things. So it's very much part of the philosophy of what you guys do. I would like to now kind of get into a little bit about your background. I know you've prepared a small presentation for us and for the audience, and I think it's going to be quite interesting to see the kind of work you do and what your story has been. So if I could invite you to start the presentation, would be great.
Sure, it's very short, this one. But I guess the point is to have a more informal.
Yes, I think we're gonna sort of converse a little bit, and then we're gonna also have the audience kind of weigh in with their questions. So it's going to be very casual in that sense.
Yeah. So like Aditi said, and it was a very good introduction. I am Mariana. I'm a senior architect at Zaha Hadid Architects. I'm also a tutor at DAA. I was a tutor for 4 years, and now I am also teaching live. A very specific software, which is a software that I do every day at my practice, which is called Maya. So I'm going to talk very briefly about 4 chapters, which are the chapters that I speak usually about. So very briefly, I'll be talking about me as a student, me as an architect at Zaha, and then me as one of architectural designers of fluidity design, and then a little bit of what I do beside architecture, which is also important. So I did a very long career in school. I studied for very long. Don't recommend anyone to study this long. I studied for 8 years because the study that I had in Portugal was not enough when I compared to the skills that I had, which was more architectural design. So I had to move away from Lisbon and go to London and continue studying and learning the tools, the set of tools that I required to do my kind of design. So it was 8 years, Lisbon, Milano, and London. So when I was in Lisbon, I did 6 or 7 years. It was also very long. I did a master's. I had a very different approach from the other students. I was more organic, and just because I understood the space like that, I understood that there were forces inside of your context that created this project. The organic projects are not aliens. They're actually results from your context. And I was very sure about it. And I was very convinced about my beliefs. So it was a very long process. I worked a lot to kind of make my ideas come through and to explain them. It was hard though. My teachers are extremely traditional, and they were extremely traditional, and even the country is very modernist in a way. It's still very stuck into modernist architecture and the Corbusier. So when I finished, I was worried because I knew that I was more like an architectural designer, and I saw forms as a way to integrate in the context, and form was something very important for me in a country that is not pro form. So I decided I have to go, I have to continue studying, and I don't even have the tools to do design. So I decided to go to a specific school, which is the Architectural Association in London. And I was 26 at that point. So I was a bit worried, even with my age, and continue studying and to do it by myself and to go alone. But this was the school that where Zaha was a student before, and Hem Koolhaas and Cedric Price. So I understood there is something here. And I went for the open day. And when I got there on the open day of the school, it was the final presentation of a post-graduation course called Design Research Laboratory, so the DRL. And I was amazed by it. And especially I was amazed by what was being said, which was very much in sync with everything that I believed before on my own. So I felt that, okay, maybe I do belong here. So I moved to London, I applied to that DRL, and I joined, and I got in the DRL. It was a huge turning point in my life for me. And then I moved to London. I did the DRL for a year and a half. I joined Patrick Schumacher's studio on the DRL. We did a lot of, as you can see, a lot of design, a lot of organic shapes, completely different from what we were doing in Portugal. And obviously this is a research project, so it's not beautiful. Well, it was not the point. The point was to create a thesis that explain an exoskeleton of a tower. And I was learning a lot of softwares as well. And I was a lot more free, a lot more expressive. And we presented our final project to Patrick and to the whole school. And that was the time that I realized, okay, this is the point, the part where I need to take the next step and try and join Zaha Hadid Architects, because since I was working with Patrick in this studio, I thought, let's do it. I think this is my only opportunity. Zaha was obviously a very important figure in my life, and I think most of ours. She did open a very important door.
And just for the audience benefit, Patrick Schumacher is somebody who's worked and been associated with Zaha Hadid Architects for a very, very long time. And you started working with him at AA and at the point of AA, and then transitioned. And this is the point where you transitioned and decided that you're going to go work with a firm like Zaha Hadid Architects. And I can see that. I wanted to ask you. You mentioned very briefly, and I saw another video of yours in my research, and I think you mentioned even there that you when you did your undergraduate and masters in Lisbon and in Portugal, you didn't really feel that the kind of work that you wanted to do, they didn't really understand it. But when you came to AA and started working, and at this point you started working with software, and you started working with a lot of different types of geometry, and as we can see in your thing, this is where you decided this is the kind of path you are going to take. I think this was very pivotal for you after AA, right?
It was a very critical day that I think I will never forget, the day that I heard people saying the same, presenting in front of a huge jury, and Patrick was there and Zaha, and they were saying the things that I believed when I was in Portugal about the DNA of a city, about forces, about how the form is so important. So it was really the moment when I sat down, grabbed the chair, and I decided I'm not going to continue on the open day. I'm going to stay here on the next 2 days of the presentation. And when the director actually, in the end, and now I know him personally because I also work for him, he stood up and he said something like, I know some of you in this room will probably apply next year. Don't feel overwhelmed by amount of work. And when he said that, I have a gut feeling, I think I'm going to be here next year. So it was a really turning point in my life.
I think you found your calling, and you know that expression, you find your calling. I think that's kind of something that must have happened for you. Great.
And then I was not aware that this was a lot of people from DRL was being hired by Zaha. For me, it was a completely different subject. I never thought about big offices because I'm from Portugal. Portugal is super tiny, super small. So we also tend to aim a little bit lower, I would say. We think about smaller
Right.
offices. I think most of us think about smaller offices because we don't think we have a chance at big ones, which is a
Right.
misconception. They are not even connected. Some people like smaller offices, some people like bigger. You don't have to
Yeah.
go to smaller to go to bigger. And so when I joined DRL, people started asking one another if they were going to apply to Zaha. For me, that was also a big shock. Like, why is this related, and is this even possible? And then it was. Patrick was a director. Zaha died on that year exactly. Patrick became the director. So I did the interview with Paulo Flores, who is still my boss, and director of the competition cluster. So clusters are kind of departments. They have 6 clusters, and the cluster that I'm part is a very special one because it was a cluster, the newest of the clusters created by Zaha to gather the strongest designers of the office in one floor. And she said the biggest competitions will have to pass through this cluster. So obviously, the office does a lot of different projects that we don't get to see. We don't get to see all of them, but the ones that we see on magazines or the ones that have bigger competitions or it's against very big names are usually passing through my cluster. And that's the ones you also get to see. It's where the design is taken to another level. So design is really important in my cluster. Not on all departments, design is that important. You don't have to do complex shapes every time.
Right.
And
Mariana,
most of the public don't see it.
Yeah. Just wanted to ask you again, just to explain a little bit more about how Zaha Hadid Architects works with, why is there a competition cluster there, and how it sort of works within the whole framework of the organization. Could you just shed a little more light on that?
So I think the office is quite big at this point. It's 500 people, and it has branches in Beijing and New York and a lot of other places. And most of them are in London. So I think 300 and something in London. And then obviously, because it's a lot of people, it's divided by small departments. These departments don't have a specific topic. I mean, one is for code, one is for interior design, a bit more interior design, one is for product design, but then the other ones, they don't have a specific target or subject. So the only difference is ours is mostly design driven. It's what usually we say high-end design.
Right.
So design is a very important tool here. We usually also collaborate with the other clusters who usually do the 2Ds, the 2D, the Rhino, and we give the design and the design studies. So I do a competition for a month and a half or 5 months. And then if we win and the client still wants a lot of design inputs, which usually happens, I continue on the project, which is what I'm doing right now with our suit.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. There is, like I said, one thing that we all have in common. We are very good at one specific software, which is Maya. And it's the software that I was taught when I joined DRL. It was a software that I struggled the most.
Yeah, you mentioned that you came in without knowing anything about software. You were somebody who works with their hands. You're very classical that way. You like to build things, and that's what you did in your undergrad and your master's and your postgrad. But once you came to DRL, you realized that, okay, we can, I can start learning software, which I can imagine must have been very difficult coming from a completely non-software world into a software one.
It was awful. I felt really bad. In the first 6 months of the DRL, I felt I was the worst one. I mean, I was the best one at dialoguing, and in Portugal, we are very used to be critics and to criticize and to have an opinion and to read. So I thought that was the best one. Yes. I was always participating and talking and provoking, but then when it came to software knowledge, I had to push more than the other ones because that's kind of a thing that I'm learned at home, which is if you're not the best, you just have to work 2 times more. So I always do that. Even today, I do that. So if I am not the best at it, if I'm the worst at it, that means that I just have to work more.
I think you mentioned your mom put that work ethic in
my mom, this is her work ethic. And so when I call her once about Maya, and I was in Oxford Circus and was at night and I was really sad. I said, I'm so bad at it. I don't even understand 3D modeling because we don't do it in the university. And it's really it's a mindset as well.
Right.
And I felt I'm the worst at it, and I know that this is so important for application to Zaha, and she was not even sympathetic. She was very hardcore. She was like, that only means you have to work more than them. If they are going out, you're staying modeling, and that happened.
Wow.
And
that's commitment.
Yeah. So in the end, that takes me even to this slide. This is the work that I did outside of the office. Even when I joined the office, I felt I was behind in Maya because it was a different kind of Maya. It was an office kind of Maya.
Yeah.
And on the DRL, I became good at Maya, but at DRL Maya. So when I did the office, it's a completely different culture. This is architecture. Mm-hmm. So these were the studies that I was doing alone on the weekends and after office work, just to push for the software and to, be more flexible with my workflow inside Maya. So as I was starting to grow as a software designer, I decided why not teaching this software to the DRL. Yeah. We had a very bad teacher in Maya at that time. Okay. And I didn't pick up on much. I did everything by myself. So I proposed to the director of the DRL, let's have me as a teacher, as a software teacher. And it's been 4 years that I've been teaching Maya. So these were some of my classes. They are usually the most successful ones. All the students come to the Maya class. Yeah. As you can see, it's very, very crowded.
It's a full house.
It's a full house. It's usually crazy. This year, because it was done via Zoom, it was different. Actually, It does work better though. I do recordings. Yeah, it looks a lot better.
Well, why do you say that?
It's very frustrating when you're teaching a software in a classroom, because I personally, as a teacher, like to know that everyone is at least getting an average knowledge. Yes. So I'm going computer by computer every time. I don't let anyone to stop in the beginning because they couldn't do it. So every time someone's having an issue, the scenario that you see with people with their hands up usually happens also when they are stuck. So I go computer by computer. And that kind of brought a very important subject, which is I was bluntly setting an average level. So the ones that were really good were not getting better, but the ones that are really bad were getting average.
Right.
I thought this was good for them. But now that I started the recording, I actually have time to become advanced, show them advanced, and then the students have time to learn at their own pace. So the ones that are not good, they will learn in 8 hours. The ones that are amazing are getting better. So I was kind of happy about it. I can even see on their results that they are better than my other students. Wow. Because they learn at their own pace, and that went really well.
It's a lot of their own effort and time that they put in.
Exactly, it's their own effort.
Great.
So then last year, also with the pandemic, I decided let's also teach live. This Maya thing has been a niche for the DRL, and that's also one of the reasons why they hire so much people from the DRL. So I think it's time to kind of get this knowledge out, and I started teaching live. On the weekends, on some weekends I do workshops. I usually announce them on my Instagram. Sometimes I have weekends with 180 people.
Wow.
It's a lot, but I model and then it's being recorded, and then they get the recording. I never tell them to model at the same time as me. I think that's very
so it's a live modeling demo from your end, and then they go back to the recording and do it themselves, and then you have time to view their work and then get feedback, etc. Okay.
Interesting. It's very frustrating when, this is the kind of knowledge that you get after teaching for so many years. I understood that it's very frustrating when students are trying to learn a software at the same time as your teacher. Especially when it comes to softwares. They get even this anxiety towards the software that is unnecessary, because they saw themselves like being left behind so many times. They kind of feel like scared about the software, which is not very fair.
And it's sorry, I'm just going to sorry, Mariana, I just want to tell everybody, I see a lot of raised hands from the audience. I would request the audience to put their questions. If you have a question, put it in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and we will get to it, because we're going to have quite a bit of time to answer your questions later on in the session. So just keep putting your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to it as soon as we can. Yes, Mariana, sorry.
So then I started doing a lot of design outside of the office that is not necessarily architectural, is a lot more just to push and to teach the software. So when I think about the specific technique that I want to teach them, I do a model that will teach them the technique. So it also gave me a lot of freedom outside of the office to have my own ideas, to have my own design. When you're working for someone else, obviously your ideas don't get through every time, right?
Picked up them, true.
Yeah. So I kind of created a hobby that was also monetized. So I was just working a lot more than before, but I think it's still very much worth it. And this is also another model that I did for Futurely, was part of a class. And then sometimes I take it to an architectural level, but it's not mandatory. Also part of the class. This also part of one workshop. And this was my latest workshop that I spent a lot of time creating it, but I was very happy about it. And it also creates a lot of engagement and a lot of feedback. You get a lot.
Yeah, you know, I saw this on your Instagram page very recently. Could you explain to the audience what this project was and what you were trying to do?
Yeah, sure. So I was gonna give a workshop that was a combination with Houdini. My colleague of mine, she's also an artist. She does a lot of Houdini, which is a software, generative software. And for me, she's like biggest artist. So I asked her if she wanted to collaborate with me, and I would do Maya and she would do the Houdini, and we would try and match it. So we decided to create something that was dynamic and it was related with music. I also had, for a long time, I wanted to model the interior of a shell for its acoustic properties and for the structural principle that shells have. So I decided, okay, I'm going to make the shell a concert hall. And this is basically the interior of a shell. Obviously, then I applied a lot of architectural techniques like the balconies. And then on the exterior, you can see the shell properly, and it's kind of going around the landscape.
Oh,
and
lovely.
Houdini takes in the space and then embraces, and then it comes out and it's reacting to the sound. It's a very fun workshop. And then in the end, we were happy with the final results. As more than doing a workshop about it, it was more about the project. And then we did the workshop, and the students did amazing. They did really well. The Maya and the Houdini. I was very happy with the students' results.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And a lot of your workshops are like this. You have these workshops to just generate and create different forms and projects for yourself and for your students, and then see what they come up with. Which I think is, and just for your students come from all over the world, and they're mostly architecture students, or do you get others as well? Do you have people
who got others? Yeah, sometimes I got filmmakers, a lot of designers for product design, but most of them architects. And it's the kind of students that you like, because if they are already in your workshop, it means that they really want to push their boundaries on design. Maya is demanding, and it is a challenge. So that means that everyone that is coming to your workshop is up for the challenge and wants to be challenged. So it's the kind of students that are also very committed to do it, because it's not like your everyday life software. So it's special people. I get very, very artistic, completely crazy people.
Yeah, but I can imagine that this is not a regular software that people use. This is highly specialized. So the kind of people who want to learn something like this are going to be people who are very committed to either professionally or personally understanding and learning a software, as you did when you were a student and when you were studying as well. We talked a little bit before. We asked the full question of what is fluid design, and you mentioned that one of the things that people don't see is that it's very complex engineering design as well. Just as in terms of the complex engineering part that comes in, could you tell us a little more about how you do that? Does it come in right at the beginning when you're brainstorming and conceptualizing, either in your own personal projects or when you're teaching, or even with Zaha Hadid Architects, when you're working, does it start from the beginning? Could you tell us a little more about the design process that you use for your professional work?
Sure. So usually we do start engineering talks from the beginning with consultants. We are not engineers, and it is a misconception if we act as engineers. Sometimes I can say things about my thoughts about engineering, and I do get my director asking me, I think he asked me twice, are you an engineer? And I'm like, no. So obviously we have a common sense, but we are not professionals, and the professionals that we work with are usually really good. So they start in the beginning with us, with our sketches. In a competition, for example, we do a lot of different sketches. That's what we do. We have, let's say, 4 of me. So 4 designers and then planners who are doing the 2D. So the 4 of me are doing 4 options each. So we gather for brainstorm. What kind of options have you done? What makes more sense with the brief? Obviously, the director is the one that has more or less an idea of what he wants or what he thinks is the most important thing for the brief. So he is a decision maker, always, and ultimately. We also brainstorm alone without him and just between ourselves. And then as we are more or less convinced with 3 sketches, let's say, we run them through the engineers and they have their own sketches on our sketches of how the structure would perform. Yes. Usually, obviously, we start with the traditional ones with column truss kind of scheme and orthogonal grid. You don't see it very obvious, but a lot of the projects have an orthogonal grid behind, and a lot of it is just cladding around. But if we need something more complex, that's what the structural engineers are there for. And then we decide on one sketch. The whole team gathers their forces towards one sketch only. We start interiors. We help with the plans. We do everything that is design on the project, the exterior, the facade, the landscape. And the consultants, engineering consultants, are also doing their own booklet and their own part of the project, structural wise. And it's not just engineers. We also have landscape designers sometimes, or lighting designers, consultants that are also doing their own booklet, and then we gather everything for one project only. It was actually a competition I did with my friends. I did outside of the office. It's also something important I've realized more and more to do, work outside of just your regular job. And this was one of them. It was a lot of fun. It was the Hyperloop Campus competition. We got the finalists award, which is also good. And again, it was mainly done in Maya with my concept design, and then we took it to Rhino, and we actually outsourced most of the renders to Metrica Visuals. And this was the money shot, so it was my favorite part of the project. It's something that it's very important when I'm designing, or whenever someone is designing, is to set a camera that is going to be the camera that sells your project the best. And whatever you do, that camera has to be perfect. You don't have to solve the whole building, but that part of the building has to be designed to the last detail. And I spent a long time modeling this one that we're looking at.
I like your term, the money shot. Get the money shot right, everything else will work out. You have to make that the main focus. Got it.
And so even some clients say it's the selfie shot, the Instagram shot.
The Instagram shot.
Which is true. They say it, imagine, which is true. It's selling the projects at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to have that impact. I think the impact, even on now, it's all about impact and what sells. So I get that. Yeah.
This was a bit of the interiors. And this is a bit more of the office chapter. So I cannot show all the projects that I've worked on because of the NDAs that we have, obviously in competition. Yeah. But some of them we have won, and I can show you some that I've won that are already published, and the ones that I like the best.
Those will be great. Yeah.
Yeah. So this one is the Shenzhen Tower, the Tower C. It was a competition done last year for 5 months. I was in this competition from the very first day 0. I'm still the only original of this competition. It was me and 3 other designers. They were my leads, and I was the youngest. I brought a lot of ideas for elegancy for this plot. So the brief was twin towers. So they were not even meant to be connected. They were just twin towers with 400 meters high. And we were competing against UN Studio, Foster, SOM. I think SOM stayed until the last days. And so everyone wanted the site. The brief was really good. The 400 meters is very high, and the towers are very slender. And my options were always about an elegant tower that was hugging, that was connected, and I always pushed for that idea. So it's not just two twin towers; it's a connected tower. And then my project leader also picked up on that idea and did this big wing that is opening. We call it the skirt, and that is bringing the green landscape up. And then the team started growing. We liked that. We continued that idea, and the team became like 12 people or something. Became quite crazy. And after 5 months, we submitted the project, and we knew that we won in November. So a long time after, and we were super excited. And we started to work now for construction. And I am part of that team for the next year. I'm working on Tower City. So I'm looking at these every day of my life.
Yeah, this is going to be with you for a while.
Yeah, I'm looking at these little, all of the details like you can look at, they're a little headache. Everything in here is a tiny headache. So now we are working also with the Beijing office. So it's the London office and the Beijing office working together to get this built. This was another project that I did, that one that I really enjoyed because it's a very different kind of project. It was the airport for Sydney. It's a very different Zaha project. It's more connected to nature. It's completely done in timber. It's a lot simpler. For example, the curves here are completely driven by engineering. They are ruled surfaces. So one curve is actually loft with the other one. Everything is single curved, which was very important for that. For engineering. And it was also a competition that we won. I thought it was too simple in the beginning, and I was very scared about it, but we won because we were very respected. We were respecting the culture of Sydney quite a lot with the idea of the wood and the traditions. So it might get built next year. And this is another one that was published recently. It also won, and it was a competition that I joined only in the end. So I did these little pods that you see here, these tiny babies. They were just a hotel and a convention center, and it also became one of the main gates to get in the whole project. So, but it was a project that my colleagues that are actually my friends, and they are really, really good. So I was very happy to be on their team.
Great.
And then outside of architecture, I also do other stuff, a bit more design, and just to try a lot of technique. And I did this chess set when I was on holidays, and it became something big, and I might try and get it manufactured. And I'm also collaborating with the team that wants to take the chess set to VR and to make a live session of chess games.
Wow.
And this is a bit my everyday life. So I'm not just doing office, I'm also teaching, and I'm doing my own projects, and I'm trying to take these projects to the next level. And that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mariana. That was sorry. Yeah, I'm back online. That was pretty fascinating. Thank you so much for that. I'm really amazed at the kind of work that you're doing, and your journey has been pretty phenomenal. And working with a firm like Zaha Hadid, and the work that you're doing, and the fact that you're an educator, it's been pretty great. So thank you so much for that. I have another poll question, if we can bring that up, and then just get the audience involved again. We want to know what you think. Swapna, could you have the second poll question come up, please? Yeah, so here is the key advantage of generative design is, the first option is unlimited design options, automated adjustments or iteration, reducing costs, removing constraints on creativity, and adaptability. And we'd like the audience to kind of weigh in on that. Oh wow! Okay, so we've already got quite a few answers from us, and sorry, I'd like to read them. Or let's take a second, because these numbers keep changing. So we've got a lot of people signing in.
It's a very good question and very smart answers, by the way.
Great, because I want to ask you something about this as well. So I'm just waiting for the audience to weigh in, and I would like to also know from you what you think the key advantage of generative design is, because you're somebody who's at the cutting edge of it and you work with it all the time. So here we are, we have pretty balanced. Adaptability seems to be the biggest one. Removing constraints on creativity is next. Unlimited design options is after that. Automated adjustments and iteration. And then lastly is reducing costs. So I think people find that generative design is something that could be very, very easy to adapt to a changing environment, to a changing style, to the way the design process works. I wanted to ask you now, what do you think is the key advantage of generative design being in it?
Okay, I think we have a very smart crowd, by the way. Adaptability, it is a key word, and I would also lean towards adaptability. But there is something, just to talk about how unpopular reducing costs was. There is something very important about generative design, which is optimization. So whenever you are iterating, usually not every time, you are also optimizing your form, let's say. So optimization is also a way to reduce costs, right? Because optimizing means that you are describing, in this case, the shortest path from one point to the other one. Optimization, it is telling me what's the shortest. Without being like a straight line, for example. So sometimes this also helps on your costs. So when you are optimizing, you are also reducing the complexity, and you are reducing material, for example, and that helps a lot on costs. So usually generative design, when it is going towards optimization, okay, so when it's optimizing, it's helping you on reducing costs. For example, a very, very important example is solar analysis. We do a lot of it. We have our object, let's say it's half in glass and half solid, and we do solar analysis. We have a generative response from Grasshopper in this case, and it is telling us how much glass we have. There it shouldn't be there, that we have too much glass here, so it's too exposed, and this glass here is completely, let's say, it has zero exposure, so it probably shouldn't even be there. You can take the glass out, or this glass is totally exposed to sun, so we should even include a little bit more solid and take glass out. So it is reducing costs. It is optimizing the costs, okay? And so generative design has a very important impact on costs and optimization. With no doubt, adaptability is.
Yeah, I think the second point of automated adjustments and iterations, I think we could substitute the word automated with even optimized adjustments or iterations, because that's what you're talking about. That impacts the costs, it impacts a lot of other things, and that also is a very important part of your project, because you do have to think about costs and how much as designers and as part of a team that becomes in the final stage, of course, it'll become much more important. I do want to ask you something about, you've mentioned, in another interview I've seen of yours, but you've mentioned that when you joined Zaha Hadid Architects, you found that the people there were just like you, very committed, very passionate, very like-minded, and very motivated. As a young architect, how do you feel, what is the importance of learning how to work in a team? And what is the skill set I think somebody would need to work well within teams? Because that's a very key part of even your work.
Super important. So I think it's a very good strategy that school makes us work in teams from, I don't know, in my school, it was the second year, towards the very end, you're working in a team, and that is key, because you are going to work in a team in your office. Especially what I do, it is 100% teamwork. And it's not because it's friendly and you need to be friendly. No, it's not that. You need to know how to coordinate, and how to know that half of your project is being developed by other person. So how can I have a grasp of what he's doing, and he knows what I'm doing, and then we are going to combine. And this really requires experience.
Yes.
It's not just a friendly note, you need to work in teams because we live in a society. It's not just that, it's really because it gives you knowledge to know how to take orders, to do orders, and to work with someone who's doing the same as you. So it became something really important. I did a very lonely path. I was working very much alone, especially when I did my master's. I did 2 years, 3 years alone, and it was very, very strongly lonely path. So when I joined the RL, it was actually a relief that it had a lot of teamwork. And I still say that the RL is more than a lot of work, it's a lot of social work, because you need to know how to deal with your team, and your team needs to be in sync with you, and you need to believe in the same things. A lot of groups in all years, even now, they collapse because they couldn't get together. They couldn't agree on anything, or they have completely different workflows, or they have the strong egos that don't think that they are old enough to have this ego. So a lot of teams actually don't make it to the end on the RL because they didn't know how to work in teams.
Yeah.
In every year, there's like a group that is like crossed. They're not going to make it.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't work with each other.
Yeah, and as a young professional, especially, it's very important here to start learning how to work in teams. For example, like you work in Zaha Hadid Architects, you mentioned you work with different types of people. You work with engineers, you work with landscape artists, you're a designer, so you rely a lot as part of your design process on other people's expertise, their experience. And although you do work in teams, you also need to show autonomy when heading your project. So the combination of both skills is very, very important for somebody who's for architecture and for working within teams of architectural firms. I do want to also ask you, now that you've been with Zaha Hadid Architects, and you've been working as an educator, as a designer, and you'll also be teaching students from all over the world. Do you think there is a difference in the way architecture can be taught now versus when you were a student? Do you think the way that you've been teaching it is the future of how students can learn architecture, learn software? Mm-hmm. How do you feel? Where is this heading in your opinion?
I still think that what I learned on the DRL, it shouldn't be mandatory. Not everyone is interested in architectural design, and not everyone is interested in design research. Mm-hmm. It should be optional, but it should be there. It should be in schools for people to actually take it. I'm in Portugal. You don't talk about form. Actually, it's a cliche. It's a cliche. It's a taboo to talk about form. It's a taboo to talk about beauty. It's a taboo to talk about elegancy. You don't say those words. You don't say the words. You would look like you are naive when you say form. And actually, the culture that I have and the intuition that I have is a lot formal, because this is form. Yes. It does exist. We do have to live with form, so we might as well embrace it and learn about it. Right? So which is very funny, because from a country that does not believe in form, a box is a pretty strong form. And it's a very, very strong statement. It's even more artificial than the organic architecture. So the box will probably not be embedded in this context like everyone says. It will make a very strong argument that probably could be better if it was more organic. So, but you don't learn these skill sets to know how to do this when you are in school. Yeah. So that's why I had to study for 8 years. And I think it's a waste of time for every student to learn 8 years of architecture. They should have the possibility of extending their skill sets in school. Yeah. So if everything goes right, I think we will bring this to the schools that are interested in doing it.
Yeah, I think that's something that's interesting, right? So even for Sindh-based school, they're looking to the future. How are they going to teach their students, and what do they need to teach their students, and how technology has really moved us from a very classical sense of learning about architecture to newer ways, to ways where you were teaching about parts of architecture and software and architecture design. Like we said, I think generative design is adaptable. I think architecture also needs to have adaptability because it needs to kind of move with the times. And especially the pandemic has created this need for it. And perhaps it was always there, but now you have ways to fulfill that need and have students from all over the world. And
exactly.
I can imagine.
Exactly. It became quite simpler. It became quite simpler.
Yeah.
More than before.
Exactly. And that's kind of amazing because even students from center-based school could be learning anything from anywhere online about architecture if they wanted to. And that's kind of a great world that opens up for students when they want to learn. What do they want to learn and how do they want to invest their time? So it's actually quite amazing how technology has moved us to that place. I have a bunch more questions, but I know that the students have a lot of questions. So I would now want to kind of shift and pivot to our Q&A round. And I can see that there are a lot of questions that have come up in the Q&A box. So let me start. Mariana, please feel welcome to stop share screen and then just come online. And I'm going to go directly to Q&A and let me start with the first question. This comes from, let me say, this comes from Al-Walid Al-Baik. He asks, I have a graduation project this year for summer and I want to make as much time possible in vacation to prepare for it. How would you recommend me to prepare for it and maximize the use of vacation time? I think this is quite an interesting question to start with. What would you recommend, Mariana?
And maximize what?
How would you recommend me to prepare and maximize this use of vacation time in preparation? I think there's a graduation project that he wants to complete this summer. So how should he approach his graduation project? What is the best way to use his time? Any quick tips? I think it's a fairly general question. I don't think there's anything.
Yeah, it's very general. I don't know how fast you are when you are working. I don't want to bring any unhealthy tips. When I was on DRL, it was a post-graduation project though. I was working every day, including weekends. But it also depends on you. If you like your project, if it's giving you any pleasure to work on it, extend your hours. If it's not giving that much pleasure, just set a very specific schedule. Make sure that you are completely following your schedule. It's very important that you write down every day what you have to do. I do it myself. Yeah. Also important for you to tick things because you feel very fulfilled. Even sometimes I'm feeling a bit lazy, so it helps me when I write down very short stupid tasks, but it's good when I feel that I've done them. Like window frames or doors. Just simple things, and the list is big, but I'm like ticking and that keeps you going. So I would definitely do that for your everyday task. And then the way you balance vacations or work, I think it's really personal. It's really up to you.
Okay, let me come to Megha. Megha asks, how difficult is it to design buildings for an unknown future?
I mean, we all do that, right? The unknown future, we all, for all of us, the future is unknown and we are building for the future, all of us. Even if it looks futuristic or not, it's going to be for the future. And maybe let's change the question a little bit for how can you be innovative in an office that really encourages you to be innovative and to think outside of what you have seen before. And that is a very big challenge because it's something that in the office you've really pushed for, which is do something that we haven't seen. And sometimes that creates a bit of pressure because you're not everyday creative, or you're sometimes a bit more lazy here and there, and it's hard to think outside of the box. But usually I take the precedents and I look at the precedents and I have a critical opinion about them, so I improve them in a new sketch, for example. I do look a lot of precedents from the office, obviously, and then I try to see what's the next step for this feature, not for the whole project. Is what's the next step for doors? What's the next step for a void? What's the next step for the roof? So I do it like feature by feature, being a bit critic about it as well.
Okay. I think this next question is kind of connected to what you just said. Mohammad Nehal asks, many of these projects are enormous in scale. Do you ever feel overwhelmed or creatively blocked when tackling such projects, even with a team?
No, not overwhelmed, because when I'm modeling, because I'm modeling digitally, you get a very, you lose a little bit of the notion of the scale. That's why I also bring always a human figure, even if I'm doing something right from the beginning. I have a little human just to understand how big this is. And then sometimes it's scary when you're like designing something huge. You just realize it's huge, and someone says, "Can you extrude 1 meter?" Let's say, and you extrude 1 meter, and it's like you don't even see it. And then you understand, okay, this little object is lost in space. So it should be a bit gradual. I do something really big, and then I put in a little bit of more information on the big, and then more information, then more information, to the point that the scale is human scale. You don't understand, like, it's not lost in space. So it is very gradual. It's a gradual work from very big to normal.
You build it up. You build it up as you go along. Okay. Pooja Devi asks, I'm a software engineer and I quit my job to pursue interior design. I don't want to go back to engineering. Do I have a future in interior design? And what is your advice for me?
Definitely. I think that multidisciplinary knowledge is better than just one knowledge. So I wish I had a bit more knowledge in engineering myself, because I know I would be pushing my designs even further. So I am even concerned that I'm constraining my design because I have a common sense of engineering. For example, I'm not pushing the design more. I could do it more because I have more knowledge. And in this case, you have to. You have interior designing and you have structural engineering, software engineering. So I think you can mix them both. Bring your software engineering a little bit more to your interior design, because you're unique in that kind of way. Everyone knows one thing only, and you know both. So make sure that you bring that inside as well. Don't disregard your software engineering knowledge. Bring it in. And especially now that we do so many softwares, and even, I don't know how much you know about coding, but that also helps. So I'm pretty sure you'll bring something different than your colleagues.
Great. Somebody asks, what is the best software for parametric design, according to you?
So for parametric design, which is something that it has been a bit misconceived lately. I mean, all of us, the culture kind of changed parametric design to a specific style, and it's not really true. What you see mostly is Maya, but we say it's parametric, and it's not necessarily parametric. It was done by a free modeling. Most of it is free modeling. If you want to do parametric design, so I'm assuming you're saying parameters, you're implying parameters. That would be Grasshopper, but that does not mean that you can model a building. That's very important. Parametric design is when you apply parameters to, let's say, optimize a shape, panelize a shape, do a stair, for example. Amazing for parametric design. Anything that has a gradient, openings, facade. But when you're modeling a building, Maya, no doubt.
Excellent. So Maya for modeling a building, for parameters and other stuff, you can use Grasshopper as well. Okay, Megha asks, do you think innovative, cost-effective, and responsible architecture can be brought together at the same time?
It's a tough question, because coming from DRL, I would say yes, right? Because that's what they are advocating for. But I'm also very traditionalist in a way. I'm realistic. I'm very grounded. And personally, I don't spend much time thinking about something that is so out of hand yet. And it does not seem that it will happen in the near future, the future that I'm alive at least. So I do spend more time thinking about architecture that is palpable and does not change over time and does not change over reaction with your agents. But maybe in the future it will make sense. It will require a lot of mechanism, and it also requires a lot of theoretical background, which I still think it doesn't have still a very strong purpose to exist. when it comes to the costs of it to exist. You know what I mean? So for
Yeah.
architecture to adapt and to change, you will bring in costs and mechanisms that maybe are not necessary when you counterbalance with what is it for. But it is a very poetic. It's nice to hear DRL. It's super based on it, agencies and spaces changing and kinetics, but not for me.
Okay, Mohammed Nial asked another interesting question. We just have time for a couple more questions, and then I have some closing questions for Mariana. So guys, I'm sorry if we couldn't get to all of your questions, but I will try a couple more. Mohammed Nial asks, would you say fluid architecture represents the will of the current era? If so, how? And could it be considered a natural evolution of our architectural design in response to our current needs and trends?
Yeah, I think it's not responding yet. I do think we are actively aiming to have architecture that is responding to present data. Right now, we are doing a lot of efforts to learn these softwares that actually take on present data and create buildings that answer to the present. I think that's major in these days. Before, to understand what's the solar impact on your building, you'd have to read books. You have to find a specialist here and there. Right now, I think we have no excuses. Everything is out there. Everything is on the internet. Everything is accessible. So if you want to know how much glass your building should have, which is the most expensive material of your building, you just have to get the real grasshopper definition, then you understand how much glass you should have. If you want to know if you have a facade completely facing south, so you have to put air condition inside, so you completely damaging the environment, you have a grasshopper definition that tells you how much of your facade is facing south. So I think right now we have the data, we have the means, and we are creating this culture that actually uses this. And we have tutorials in the office to learn how to use these softwares. We have CPDs. We are all of us are trying to actually make a future that is not futuristic for the sake of design and futuristic for the sake of aesthetics, but it's futuristic for the sake of we care about the subject. We have done enough to damage it. We can still be creative. We can still create design, but with present data. So I think that's probably what the future will be in architecture, hopefully. We just have to make it less expensive and probably more entertaining, because none of us love it. None of us love to do it, but we can make it cool, still cool.
Okay, great. I just have one last question from the audience, and then we're going to have some closing questions. And this is actually part of one of my closing questions as well. So I'm glad somebody has also mentioned it. Students usually are very concerned, and I know you know about this quite well. They're always concerned about their portfolios and how they look to prospective firms like Zaha Hadid Architects, for example. Could you tell the audience, what does an architectural firm like Zaha Hadid look for when they are looking at hiring designers and hiring architects? What do you think are the key things that they look for?
I think it's hard to say what the office looks for, because I'm not responsible for all the departments. But I think as an overall comment, and the office is huge, so it does work like a huge city. For an overall comment, whenever you're applying your portfolio, you have two ways to go about it. You have a portfolio that shows that you're good at a bit of everything, and you are a full package architect that can take a project from the beginning to the end, or you know that you're specialized in a part of your project, or you're really passionate about one part of this process, and you really make your portfolio look like it. So in my case, I was really good in big designs and big concepts, and I was really good in having a lot of ideas. So my portfolio would probably show more of that. So whenever I'm hiring, I understand this person is really good for this stage. So you have those two ways. I also like architecture from the beginning to the end, but I think I would be happier to do this stage. Obviously, when you are aiming for a niche in your office, you are also reducing the chances of being hired, and that's important, right? Because when people are hiring, they have something very specific. It's very uncommon for an office to think, let me hire someone and let me see what they have. No, usually offices are hiring because they look at their office and they think, we have a lot of people knowing Rhino, but no one knows AutoCAD. So when they're hiring, you don't know, they're looking for AutoCAD. Sometimes they're hiring for Maya, sometimes they're hiring for, they have a project that is, we won the competition and it's mostly retail or shopping mall. So they will look for someone who did a lot of shopping malls. We don't know that. That's why we always say that it's very, there's not a recipe for it. And it's very much about the best timing, because it really depends on which project this director is hiring for, which software this director wants, which position does this person is needed for which phase of the project. So it's not a very easy question. If you are aiming for the Zaha office, obviously, whatever stage you like, even detail stage, show design, show that you like design. Don't show the traditional shapes. Show that you are interested in design and you are good at doing either the 2D or the 3D or the first stage.
I think what you mentioned at another point is also that students shouldn't feel demotivated if they feel like they got passed on, because often it's very about a very specific type of person that they're looking for. So keep applying, keep looking at different types of studios and move on. If something doesn't work out,
definitely.
move on to the next one.
Maybe it's even interesting. I know some people who joined the office because they came from DRL. I know people who joined the office because they applied on the website, and they are my leads. So even the website works. Okay, it does not mean that you're being dismissed. It is very annoying that a lot of offices don't reply. All of the office don't reply back. And I don't think that will change. You'll never get someone saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry, you didn't get it." No, you get the silent treatment, and that's extremely demotivating. I've never been through that, but all my best friends, they went, and it was very hurtful to see them as amazing, and they were really good architects, not even getting a response. But the reality is, you just move on to the next one. And even if you like that office that much, that was just not the best time to send your portfolio. Doesn't mean that you're not good. It means that maybe you didn't know AutoCAD. Yeah. Maybe that you didn't know towers. Maybe you didn't apply after. You didn't lost your only shot.
Yeah. And I think that kind of brings me to the last question. I'm sorry, I know Mariana, there's so many questions, but I'm sorry we're running out of time. Guys, very, very sorry we couldn't attend to all of them, but I'm sure if you follow Mariana and her work, you can always get in touch with her and ask your questions.
Of course.
I want to close the session by asking you one last thing, and this is a series about point of view. I know I think a lot of students struggle with this idea of having a distinctive style in their projects, or having a portfolio that shows a particular style. What do you feel about that word style?
No, I have a very big problem with the word style. Style for me is like, it sounds like someone needed to organize their ideas in history, in time, and say, this is this style, this is that style, this as like a mean to organize, but the style was not really existing. You know what I mean? It's the way we also study history of art. So this is this style, this is that style. This is a way of putting things in a drawer. I think nowadays you have less and less, I would like to believe, the style. That's why I also have a problem with the parametric thing, because it's creating the style that it's not even real. So that also brings me to another thing, which is people thinking that Zaha has a style. And then a lot of people even complain when something does not look like the style that they thought it had.
Yeah.
When it proves the point that there is no style. Okay, it does look, or it is organic, it is fluid, and it's not always organic. Sometimes it's actually boxy. So there is no style. People are encouraged to do completely different designs. We have people who do boxes, we have people who do circles, and we have people who don't do pure geometry. So there's no style. The point is to bring the design to the next level, whatever style it has.
Yeah.
So obviously that brings us to, when you are applying, you better not have the style. So when you are applying, you are showing, I can do everything. I can do pure geometry, I can do fluid design, I can do personalized design. So do not get stuck into what it seems to be an aesthetic connection between buildings. An aesthetic correlation between buildings actually gets you stuck in something that it's also very subjective to taste.
Yeah.
So I do encourage you to force yourself to do different shapes, even different shapes.
Yeah, I agree. The more diverse the better. I think the more
Definitely.
variety, the better. My last question is, Mariana, and somebody asked in the Q&A, and we're going to end with that, is how do you think students can get more interested in fluid design? And what can they study it more? Do you recommend they study it as a master's degree? Can they study it somewhere, or do you feel that there's another way of learning about fluid design and fluid architecture design?
I think that what happened with the pandemic as well, it was there before, but now it's more emphasized. Is a part where you an educational part that is not from your traditional institution, but it's from people who do it in their daily practice, from other offices who teach them. And for example, fluid design is something that's being widely taught outside of school. So in digital means, you have a lot of live workshops happening. Instagram is usually the best. I recommend Design Morphine. I recommend Futurely. All of these guys are bringing people who work for Big, who work for Foster, who work for Zaha, and they are teaching.
Could you mention the studio on Instagram? The page?
Yeah, I could definitely write it down here.
Sure, that will be great. More people check that out.
I recommend Academy, Futurely, and Design Morphine. Okay, so all of these academies are digital academies of tutors that work for big offices or who have like a very big understanding of generative design and latest technology. So I would definitely, yeah, I think I wrote 12 panelists. I would, sorry. I only did panelists. I would definitely, I would definitely encourage people to look for these workshops and to take them. It was a bit sad that I didn't have it back then, but I'm very proud to be part of it these days, right? It's good to know that the new students are doing something more than what you did. So they will move forward faster. I mean, I hope.
Great. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this session. And this was an incredible session personally for me, and I'm not even from architecture, and I have learned so much. Mariana, thank you so much for spending time with us. I know you're on a deadline, and we really appreciate the time. And I think it was really, really informative for our audience. To our audience, thank you very much for tuning in. Mariana, you can share, you can follow Mariana. She's also shared some interesting links to other people who are doing very interesting work in fluid design architecture. And I think tomorrow we have another session coming up on architecture with Takbir Fatima, which is going to be very interesting because it's again another complete perspective, a different point of view on architecture. And we're going to be talking to her about her journey and her work. And please tune in for that because it's going to be an excellent session. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us. Mariana, we hope to see you again. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Good luck with everything as well.
Thank you so much. And take care, everyone. Good evening. Bye.
Bye.